What's up guys, Sagi here, and welcome to another Tech Gear Talk. Today we're going to be comparing the Canon 90D and the Canon SL2, also known as the 200D, depending on where you live. The 90D is one of Canon's newest DSLRs, and while the SL2 is a little bit older, it's still packed with a lot of great features. And ever since I published my review of the 90D, people have been asking me to help them choose between these two great options. So today I'm going to put them head to head, talk about the pros and cons of each, and see if I can help you make a decision. Now the 90D is of course more expensive than the SL2, so I'm going to go over the strengths and weaknesses of both cameras when it comes to photography and video, and let's see if it's actually worth the added cost for you and what you plan on doing. My goal with every camera comparison is to give you a detailed overview of both cameras, but then compare them in a way that relates to real life use. I will go over some of the important specs of these two cameras, as well as share my actual user experience with you. Now before getting into the detailed comparison, here are some key features in case you're just starting your research. The 90D features a 32.5 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor and a Digic 8 processor. It uses a 5481 point dual pixel autofocus system when using live view and a 45 point all-cross type autofocus system when using the viewfinder. It has a 3-inch 1.04 million dot fully articulating touchscreen and an optical viewfinder with 100% coverage. You can record 4K in 24 and 30 frames per second. You can shoot full HD at 1080p all the way up to 120 frames per second for slow motion, but with some limitations that I'm going to discuss later on in the video. We've got a 3.5mm mic input and a headphone jack, in-body 1080p and 4K time-lapse, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth for remote control and easy file sharing. And finally, it offers digital image stabilization that can work together with lens-based IS. Now the SL2 has a 24.2 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor. It also uses Canon's dual pixel autofocus system, just an older version, and it has a Digic 7 processor. It has a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen LCD, and it can shoot video at up to 1080p at 60 frames per second. It has an optical viewfinder with 9 autofocus points and an external mic input, which lets you use an external microphone and get better audio. We get in-body 1080p time-lapse, Wi-Fi with Bluetooth so you can easily move images to your mobile device, as well as have full control over the camera using the Canon Camera Connect app. Okay, so let's get into the comparison. The first thing I want to mention is the price. So the 90D sells for $1,200 and the SL2, while discontinued in most places, can be purchased on eBay or used for less than $500. And I sometimes get asked why every once in a while I choose to compare cameras at seemingly different price points. And the reason beyond all the requests that I get is that once you start factoring in everything that you need, so the lenses, the lighting, camera bag, camera support, maybe a gimbal, and all the other accessories, the difference in the price of the body becomes a much smaller function of the overall cost. But before you jump on the low price of the SL2, let's see if the added cost of the 90D proves to be a better value. All right, so first I want to talk about the sensor and the processor. So the 90D comes with Canon's newest APS-C sensor. It's a 32.5 megapixel CMOS sensor, and it also has the newest processor, the Digic 8. The SL2 comes with a previous generation 24.2 megapixel sensor and the Digic 7 processor. So as we dive deeper into each section of the review, we're going to see improvements in terms of resolution and processing power on the 90D. Now while the 90D does have a newer and therefore faster and more powerful processor, both cameras operate very fast. Like simple operations like startup, going in and out of the menu, and then going into shooting, and then preview, and then back to shooting, those types of things are very quick. But in terms of performance, one of the things that I look at with every camera that I use is continuous or burst shooting. So you can just take either of these cameras, just point it at the subject, hold down the shutter, and the camera will just keep on firing. It's a really nice feature if you're photographing sports, kids, pets running around, or any type of fast-moving subject. Now, of course, the more frames per second you can get, the more exposures you'll have to pick from later on. Now, when it comes to burst shooting, the 90D can shoot it up to 10 frames per second, with full AI server autofocus, while the SL2 shoots at up to 5 frames per second. So we're getting twice as many photos to choose from for every second of shooting, which makes it much more likely that we'll get the exact moment that we're trying to capture. Now, as far as buffer size, if you're shooting RAW, the 90D can hold up to 25 RAW images versus 5 on the SL2. So you're much more likely to reach the buffer limit on the SL2 and have it slow down its shooting rate. Now it's important to me that when we look at features and functions that you take a moment to think about how you actually use the camera. And when we see advantages in one direction or another, that you take into account whether it'll actually matter to you. So in this case, when we look at 10 frames per second on the 90D versus 5 on the SL2, or 25 raw images versus 5, it seems like a really big advantage to the 90D, but just ask yourself, do you ever actually shoot 25 continuous raw frames? Or really, do you shoot more than 5? And will this actually matter to you? So there's no right answer here. It has to do with how and what you shoot. So maybe you don't shoot 25 continuous raw images, but you do like to shoot sports or birds in flight, or maybe you shoot a 5-picture burst, then wait a second, then shoot another one. And then having that extra space on the buffer means that you'll never fill out the buffer and you can continue to shoot without interruptions. As far as continuous shooting, I'm going to give the edge here to the 90D because it can shoot faster and it has a larger buffer. And like I said, make sure that this is meaningful enough to you to start justifying the extra cost. To sum things up, overall when it comes to the sensor and the processor, the 90D comes out ahead with a newer and higher resolution sensor, a more powerful processor, a faster burst shooting rate, and a larger buffer. Now before I move on to the next section, if you like what you've seen so far, go ahead and let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. It helps me know what kind of content you like so that I can make more of it. And if it's your first time here, go ahead and hit the subscribe and notification buttons so you can stay up to date on all the latest gear and tutorial. And also turn that notification to all because otherwise you're probably not going to get the notifications. Moving on, let's talk about ergonomics and battery life. And I say this a lot, but one of the most important things to me with any piece of gear that I use is ergonomics in terms of both handling and the user interface. And this is something that I think a lot of people overlook when they're choosing a camera. As far as size and weight, the 90D is both larger and heavier, which could make it less appealing as a travel or vlogging camera. If you're looking for something that's very lightweight and portable, the SL2 is a great choice. Both are extremely comfortable to hold and have super deep grips. But I like the feel of the 90D better because a larger body just feels like it's easier and more secure to hold. This is even more so the case when we're using larger and heavier lenses, which can make the SL2 feel front heavy. Overall, the 90D is much more solidly built, and I like the fact that it's weather sealed, which offers protection against dust and moisture. The SL2 does not offer this type of protection, so if you plan on using this camera in situations where it may get wet or very dusty or in humid conditions, I would recommend choosing the 90D. Now next I want to discuss the buttons and dials on these cameras. I think that if you're buying a camera and you're just using it with the factory settings, you're really missing out, because part of what you get when you're buying a higher end camera is the ability to customize it to work better for exactly how you shoot. Now the 90D has lots of buttons and dials, so you don't really need to go into the menu for much. There's a dial on the top and a ring on the back for aperture and shutter speed, as well as a new joystick which Canon calls a multi-controller. I like that it's positioned higher up on the body, and I find that it's really convenient for adjusting the position of the autofocus point. Now another feature that I really like about the 90D is the multi-function lock on the bottom right. And it lets you select which buttons and dials you want to lock. So for example, when I'm shooting video, I want to make sure that I don't inadvertently change the shutter speed. I can select the shutter speed dial from the menu and then just lock it and feel comfortable that if I try to change the aperture but inadvertently reach for the wrong dial, it'll be inactive until I unlock it. Now, as you would expect, the SL2 has more basic controls with a single dial that acts as a controller for both aperture and shutter speed with the help of a toggle on the directional pad. From an ergonomic standpoint, I'm going to give the edge to the 90D. Has a more comfortable hold, has dedicated control for aperture and shutter speed, additional control functionality with the joystick and multi-function lock, and more flexibility when it comes to customizing buttons. I do want to reiterate that the SL2 is a lot smaller and lighter, so if that's your priority, you will notice a significant difference between the two. Both cameras use Canon's quick menu, which is one of my favorite interfaces, particularly when used with the fully articulating touchscreen, which I'll get to later on. The battery life is pretty good with both of these cameras. With the 90D, it's rated for 1,300 shots per charge, and the SL2 is rated for 650 shots. Both are really great, but clearly the 90D wins with double the rating. On the 90D, the right side has a barn door that's covering the SD slot. And that's great because it means that you don't have to take the camera off the tripod to remove or replace the SD card. On the SL2, that door is on the bottom, so a lot of times the quick release plate is blocking your ability to open it and either just grab the SD card or change it. Now both battery compartments are on the bottom, but with the 90D being larger, I'm able to more easily switch out the battery, again without having to remove it from the tripod or to remove the quick release plate. You can't charge either by USB, but you can use a coupler to get uninterrupted power with both models. The 90D has an optical viewfinder which offers 100% frame coverage. It includes autofocus points and mode, compositional grids, and an electronic level, all of which are super helpful. It also offers face detection, and while it doesn't cover the entire sensor, it still works pretty well for a DSLR. Now the SL2's viewfinder is a lot more basic, so it doesn't include all of those features. A nice thing about the SL2 is that it has a really helpful feature assistant, which basically teaches you how to use the camera better. It will show you what changing your aperture or shutter speed will do, as well as explain why you'd want to use certain shooting modes and what exactly is being changed in each scene mode. Now this alone makes it a great camera for beginning videographers and photographers. Next, I want to talk about resolution, frame rates, and image quality. For photos, the 90D has a maximum resolution of 6960 by 4640, and the SL2 offers a maximum resolution of 6000 by 4000. Now this additional resolution with the 90D means that you have more flexibility when it comes to cropping your images. I was really happy with the images that I got from both cameras. I felt like I can use the images right out of the camera, and I've always been a fan of Canon's color science. And when I say that, I mean that the colors right out of the camera look the way that I like them to look. Of course, if you shoot raw and you make a lot of edits to your photos in post-production, that's less important for you, but that's always something that I enjoyed in my Canon cameras. Now the SL2's image quality is great for the price, but as we expect, the 90D provides the next level up. The images were crisp, with good dynamic range and outstanding JPEG color processing. Skin tones appeared natural, and with the added face detection, I really enjoyed using it for portraits. Now moving on to video, the 90D can record 4K in 24 and 30 frames per second, and Full HD or 1080p at 24, 30, or 60 frames per second. You can also shoot 1080p at 120 frames per second for slow motion, but at the expense of no continuous autofocus, no image stabilization, and no audio. Now at first the 90D didn't offer 24 frames per second in 4K or 1080p, but Canon added both options with a firmware update. And by comparison, the SL2 doesn't offer 4K at all, but it can shoot 1080p or Full HD at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. Now if you think you want to shoot in 4K now or in the future, go ahead and get the 90D. There's no additional crop when shooting in 4K, which is something that we saw on the M50 and the SL2, and we still get to use the dual pixel autofocus, which again is something that we weren't able to do with the SL3 or M50. If on the other hand, all you need is 1080p, then the SL2 will get you excellent results. All right, moving right along to the next section, let's talk about autofocus. With still images, both cameras have two systems, one for the viewfinder and one for the LCD when using live view. On the viewfinder, the 90D uses a 45-point all-cross type system, and you get subject recognition and face detection when shooting through the optical viewfinder, which is a great feature. The SL2 only offers 9 points in the viewfinder, with only the center being cross type, and then of course, no face detection. When using the LCD with live view, both cameras use Canon's dual pixel autofocus system, but the 90D has a more advanced implementation which covers the entire height of the sensor and 88% of its width, with 5,481 autofocus points. With the 90D, we also get eye detection for extra accuracy versus only face detection on the SL2. When it comes to video, of course, both use dual pixel autofocus system. It's reliable and consistent with face detection. It works great with both cameras. But once again, we're getting a more accurate system with the 90D, and we're getting eye detection, which again, just another level of accuracy over just face tracking. In addition to face detection, both cameras also offer subject tracking. So using the touchscreen, you can just click on any subject, the camera will identify it, and then you can see it being tracked as it's moving through the frame. And of course, if you wish to use point autofocus, you can just click on one item, get it in focus, and if you want to switch, you can just click on another item and both cameras will slowly rack focus. Overall, both cameras offer excellent autofocus systems. The 90D is more advanced in essentially every way, but for the price, the SL2 is an outstanding option. Now next I want to talk about lens options, and I think a lot of people forget to look at this part when they shop for a camera. So whether you realize this or not, when you buy a camera, you're actually buying into a lens system. And there are two major considerations there. First, what lenses are available and at what cost? And then second, what happens when you want to upgrade the body or if you have multiple bodies? And because both of these cameras natively accept EF and EFS mount lenses, you can use anything from inexpensive EFS lenses designed for APS-C sensors all the way to the top of the line L series Canon lenses. So we have a lot of focal lengths to choose from and different options for different budgets. And because this mount has been around for so long, there's also a ton of good third-party options. When you compare lenses, remember that because both of these cameras have an APS-C sensor, we always apply 1.6 crop to the focal length in order to get the full frame equivalent field of view. And I know this is sometimes a confusing topic because there's this impression that if the lens was designed for an APS-C sensor, you don't apply the crop factor. But remember that a crop is a measurement of equivalency and it's a function of the sensor size, not the lens. That was a long way of saying that when you're comparing lenses to be used on one of these APS-C sensors, you're always going to use the 1.6x crop to get the full frame equivalent field of view. I'm putting together a complete video about this topic because I do get a lot of questions about it. So if there's anything that you want to know, drop it in the comment section. Moving on, let's talk about the screen. Both have a 3-inch 1.04 million dot fully articulating touchscreen. This is my favorite implementation and I'm able to position it just how I want it, whether the camera is below eye level or even if I'm positioned to the side. So for example, if I need to get a shot over a group of people or if the camera is on a tall tripod, I can easily point the screen down on both of these cameras all the way down to 90 degrees. So now I can see exactly how my shot is framed. If I'm on a slider or photographing from the hip, or if the camera is low to the ground, I can just point the screen up. And then again, it's very easy to frame my shot. Another great option is to be able to point the screen to the side. And that's useful when I'm on a gimbal and I'm orbiting around someone, or if I'm shooting a photo in portrait mode and I want to be able to see how my shot is framed, I can have the screen facing me and then I don't have to get my head all the way down there in order to see the screen if it's facing straight out. And then finally, with both cameras, if I'm in front of the camera, I can just flip the screen 180 degrees to face the front. So if I'm doing something like this, I can always see exactly how I'm framed and I can see that I'm in focus. If you remember, in the ergonomics section, I said that I love the functionality of the full touchscreen. With both cameras, I can change anything from the main menu settings, features on the quick menu, and every element of my exposure right from the screen. To me, this is really helpful, especially when I'm shooting video and I may be in front of the camera or to the side. I don't have to walk around, see where the buttons are, and try to make changes that way. The screen on both cameras was nice and bright, and it worked well for me when shooting both indoors and outdoors in most situations. Lastly, I want to talk about other features that these cameras have that may help you make a buying decision. To start off, neither camera offers IBIS or in-body image stabilization, but the 90D does offer digital image stabilization, and of course you can buy some lenses that offer optical image stabilization, which Canon refers to as IS. Next, let's talk about time-lapse because this is a feature that I look for in cameras since I use it pretty often. First off, both cameras can do in-body time-lapse. The 90D can record time-lapse in 1080p and 4K, and the SL2, since it can't shoot 4K, can only do time-lapse in 1080p. Canon makes this very simple. You just select the interval in seconds, which is how long you want it to wait between each exposure. You then select how many exposures you want it to take, and that will control how long your final time-lapse video will be. Finally, you select whether you want it to expose each shot or keep the exposure settings from the first shot and use them for all subsequent shots. That's it. Once the camera is done shooting, it will compile the time-lapse and it'll be ready for you to either view it in camera or to be used for video editing. And this makes it way easier and less time consuming than creating a time-lapse with individual photos and then using editing software to compile the time-lapse. Next, let's talk about audio features. So both cameras come with a 3.5mm mic input, which allows us to connect an external microphone and get much better audio than the camera's built-in microphone. I have audio samples in a dedicated 90D review, and I'd really encourage you to go listen to the difference. I know this isn't always possible because of budget, but whenever possible, I would only use the built-in microphone on these cameras as a last resort. And the 90D has a couple of important advantages in the audio department. First, in addition to the mic input, it also offers a headphone jack that you can use to listen to and monitor your audio while you're recording. This can be super helpful because it allows you to identify and correct issues with audio in real time rather than having to try to fix them in post. So for example, you may throw on a pair of headphones and then realize that there's an AC or a fan running in the other room and that the microphone is picking it up. Then you can just go and shut it off rather than having to try to remove it from every clip in post-production. And like I mentioned, the SL2 doesn't have a headphone jack, but a new microphone that I'm testing can help with this issue. It's the Boom XU from Comica Audio, which is a wireless system consisting of 2 transmitters and 1 receiver. And this does a couple of things for me. First, it lets me get great audio without having to be wired to the camera. And second, I can actually get separate audio from 2 people on separate channels with only 1 receiver and without needing any splitters or an audio interface. And finally, I have a headphone jack to monitor audio on cameras that don't offer this option. This is not quite as accurate as on the 90D because we're hearing the audio before it's being processed by the camera's preamps, but it will definitely help identify problems before and during recording. So here I am using the built-in microphone on the SL2. I'm sitting probably about 3 feet away from the camera in a fairly well-treated room, so this should give you an idea of what using the built-in microphone is going to sound like. And now I'm using one of the Boom XU transmitters. It's clipped right onto me and I'm using one of the provided lavalier microphones. I then have the receiver mounted right on the SL2 and plugged right in. The great thing about this setup is that I can sit as far away as I want from the camera and the audio is going to sound exactly the same. And this will give you an idea of what using an external wireless microphone is going to sound like, and also give you a pretty good idea of what the Comica Audio wireless Boom XU system is going to sound like. All of this audio is unedited, it's just straight from this microphone into the camera. Now the final advantage of the 90D when it comes to audio is that the audio levels are always shown on the screen when I'm in movie mode. This means that I'm always able to set and monitor my audio levels in real time to make sure that they're in the proper range. Not too low where I can't hear the person, and not too high to where they begin to clip and distort. And one thing that's super important is that I can change the gain or the levels before and while recording without having to go into the main menu and without having to stop my recording. On the SL2, I have to stop the recording every time I want to turn the gain up or down and then start recording again. Moving on, both cameras have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you can easily connect them to your phone or tablet. This is great for when you're doing a shoot, or maybe you took some great stills and you want to very quickly share them with people or just put them on social media. You just connect your phone to the camera, transfer them, and you're ready to share them. Now using Bluetooth, you can both share images and control both cameras remotely using Canon's Camera Connect app. Now that's huge when you're working alone. You can literally use your phone as a remote monitor. There is a slight delay, but it's an awesome feature and one that I use all the time. I also like to use this feature from macro photography so I can take a picture without having to touch the shutter on the camera. Okay, so we talked about the different features of both cameras. So which is a better value, and should you spend the extra $700 to get the 90D? Well, that depends on your priorities. The 90D has a higher resolution 32.5 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor and a newer Digic 8 processor. It uses a newer and more advanced 5481-point dual pixel autofocus system when using live view, and a better 45-point all cross-type autofocus system with face detection when using the viewfinder. In addition to great 1080p, it can also record 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, do in-body time-lapse in 4K, has better audio options, better ergonomics with additional buttons and dials, and offers weather protection. The SL2 uses a 24.2 megapixel APS-C sensor and the older Digic 7 processor. It also uses a dual pixel autofocus system, which is excellent for a camera at this price. It doesn't shoot in 4K, but for many users this isn't really a necessity. It's super light and portable, which makes it a fantastic option for travel or street photography, and you can save about $700, which you can dedicate to a few lenses and accessories. I always say that you can't have everything you want in any camera, so it comes down to what's more important to you. I do my best to answer every comment that I can, so I'm happy to continue the conversation with you in the comment section. I'll put links in the description to where you can get the 90D and the SL2, as well as some popular kits and accessories. There are always holiday specials and discounts, so the links will be updated with the lowest pricing. And if you end up ordering anything using those links, you can help support my channel for free and help me create more content for you, so thank you in advance. I also have links in the description to the more detailed review about each of these cameras if you want a more in-depth review. I really hope that I was able to give you a good comparison between the 90D and the SL2, and I'd love to hear in the comment section which option is best for you. If this video was helpful, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up, tweet it, share it, and if you haven't yet, go ahead and join the community by hitting the subscribe and notification buttons. You can always find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Tech Gear Talk. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon. On to the SL, or moving the 90D? Moving on to the SL2, but moving the 90D to ruin the shot. See, I'm very good at that. Let's put it back where it's supposed to be. I need this tea with honey and lemon. It's very important. Thing jumped right out at me. Overall, when it comes to sensor and processor, the 90D, honeydew, sea-dew, 90D. Maybe some tea. If on the other hand, what? How many hands do you have? If on the other hand, if like this other hand and that other hand, that's a lot of hands. I'll put that over there. Hopefully it doesn't show up. Did I have this bottle in any of the shots? I really hope I didn't. I try to stay hydrated while I film. I really hope I didn't put it back like this, and then it's showing up in some of the shots. We'll find out when I get to editing. Let's fail. I should mark off like a safe zone where I can put the products, not the products, but things, so they're out of frame. And then you can't see because it looks like this is super clean, right? But it's not. Like immediately out of frame, I have monitors and lots of weird stuff. Well, not weird stuff, just stuff like controlling the lights. All right, I'll see you in the next video.